Here we go. Bez Hashem, today's daf is Daf Yud Aleph. And what's interesting that we're discussing over here is a fascinating question that the Gemara asked on Daf Yud Amid Aleph. And the question is like this. I'm going to bring up the Rambam over here because it's to understand it, you can see it clearly in the Rambam. Once a person makes Kedushin, okay, on a woman, she usually remains in her father's house. So the Rambam says that she's usher to her husband. And if the husband comes in and has bia with her, he gets malchus because you have to go to chuppah. You have to have a marriage. You have to have a chuppah. And therefore, the only time that and the Rambam says, even if you did bia already, one of the three ways that the Mekadosh Nisha is kesef, shtar, and bia. The second time you do bia is asar until you bring her to your house as the chassan's house and you give her a place. And you say that this is my wife, and that's called bringing her to chuppah. That's one way. But then the Rambam says a fascinating thing. Let's say you gave kesef kedushin, right? And this is very important. Instead of, you don't want to pay for a wedding, and you don't want to have everything, you don't want to have this chuppah business. If you do the second bia, and you're thinking that I want to marry her with this bia, if you do a bia, then you're kaina, and it becomes your wife and ishtel chol davar. That's a fascinating thing. So I give kesef. Mekadosh and Isha, and then I do bia or whatever the chassan does bia for l'shem nisuin, that makes it his wife. So the Gemara's question is a fabulous question. If bia that follows kesef can make a marriage, how about making one bia and you think about that you want to do both erusin and nisuin? Does that work? So that's what the Gemara is trying to figure out. That was the question. Can one person do one bia and accomplish two birds with one stone? So the Gemara says like this with 6 lines on the top of Yud Amid Beis. Tashma to come in here. Now the halacha is, just for a way of introduction, what we're discussing over here is that the Chumash says that a kohen eats truma, of course, right? But if a kohen kiyikne nefesh, if he buys, let's say, a shifka knanis, he buys somebody, so then kinyan kaspa, he paid money for it. So who yaichel bay? That shifka knanis or evet knaini could eat truma, and if yilid beisa, if someone is his child, could also eat truma. So a kohen who buys a evet knani or shifka knanis could eat truma. That's what the Torah says. What the question that we're dealing with is, let's say your wife can eat truma. If you marry her, she can eat truma. What about if you only make kedushin on her? So that was the question in this brisa. Tashma, come in here. This Yochanan, whose name is Ben Bagbag, son of Bagbag, his name was son of Ben Bagmad of the Mishnayos. He sent a letter to Eitzel Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, who lived in Linsibin. He lived in Linsibin. So Yochanan ben Bagbad sent him a question. Shemati alecha, I heard about you. Sha'at oimer, you say that in theory, arusa bas Yisrael echelis betruma. If you do kedushin, a kohen that does kedushin with a bas Yisrael, that bas Yisrael could start eating truma even though they didn't have chuppah. And I heard you say that. Shalach loy. So Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira answered Yochanan ben Bagbad. He said, you don't agree with me? Everybody talks about you Yochanan ben Bagbag. Everybody talks about how you know how to learn. So fantastic. But you don't know how to make a simple kal v'choima. Uma shivcha. The brisa continues. This was what Yehuda ben Beseira's kal v'choima, or that an arusa bas Yisrael should be able to eat truma. Ma shivcha kananis, she'ein bi also machila betruma. When you buy a shivcha kananis, the only way you could buy a shivcha kananis is pay money, right? But if having bia with the shivcha kananis doesn't make her your shivcha kananis. So if the kohen just did bia with this shivcha kananis, that wouldn't be a suffice that she would be able to eat truma. But Kasma, if he paid money to purchase this Shivcha Kananis, Machilasa Betruma, then she could eat Truma. So Kesef, this Shivcha Kananis, Kesef works, but Bia doesn't work. Zu, a regular woman, a Jewish woman that you want to marry, that a Kohen wants to marry, a Bas Yisrael, should be also Machilasa Betruma, that if you just did Bia, now the Gemara is thinking that what he means to say is that if you did one Bia and you accomplish both, Erusin and Nisuin, So then this bia would give her to eat, would allow her to eat truma. So Eidadin, certainly, shekaspa machilasa b'truma. If you only did kesef, it should be, you should allow to eat truma. So in theory, I'm correct, says Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, that if you just give kesef to an isha and you make her erisin, she could eat truma. Avama asked, so what can I do? Shaharei Amru Chachamim. Chachamim said, "Ein arusa bas Yisrael echeles betruma ad shetikanos lechuppah." And arusa cannot eat truma until she gets into chuppah. And we're going to learn one of the reasons why a bas Yisrael, who's an arusa to a kohen, can eat truma, is because we are afraid. Even though in theory she could eat truma, but what happens? She remains in her father's house, and her brothers are Yisraelim. She might feed her brother and father some of the truma, so that's why we don't allow it. So it's a drabanan thing that we don't allow. But one thing Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira said in his comment was bi'asa machilasa b'truma. If you take an isha and you just do bia, she could right away eat truma. Right? Take an isha bas Yisrael and you just do bia, she could eat truma. Hey chidamei. So the Gemara is not investigating that. But did he mean that you did chuppah with the bia? The kesef shal yidei chuppah, and then it must be that he was talking about kesef al yidei chuppah, right? So. And he's trying to say that if bia yidei chuppah gives truma, kesef, and you do a chuppah should also eat truma. That's ridiculous, because betavaya mecha achal, that's your regular wife. Certainly she could eat. I don't need you to teach me. If there was no havamina, there's no thinking that a woman who went through kesef kedushin and had chuppah would not eat truma. Certainly you eat truma. All the point was, but Ella, it must be bia shal yidei chuppah, that he was trying to compare that a bas Yisrael who had bia and then had chuppah, and then he wants to say that eats truma. The kesef shloya yidei chuppah and kesef you did without a chuppah, right? And you want to say that bia macheles betruma, so kaspa without chuppah would also be machel betruma. She would also be able to eat truma. Wait a second, but why? How can you make a comparison? Hacha, by the bia case, Tarta, you did two steps. You did bia, and then you did a chuppah. And so that's why she's eating truma. The hacha, but kesef, you only did kesef, and you didn't do chuppah. So why should I make a kal v'chomer that you should be able to eat truma just by kesef alone? Elalav, it must be that you only did one step. And bia, shloya yidei chuppah. You did bia without chuppah. And you want to say that bia without chuppah could already make the isha eat truma. The kesef shloya yidei chuppah, and therefore we want to extend that and say just kesef alone without chuppah would also be able to eat truma. So now amrit. So now why was Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira so sure that a bia without chuppah would be able to be meichel betruma? If you want to say that if a person can do one bia and with his mind say, I want to do both, Erisin and Nesuin as a package, that makes perfect sense. And understanding the brisa, pshitale, the alimele bia mikesef. That's why bia is more stronger than kesef. That we know the whole point of Erisin is so that you can do bia, right? That's why, for example, a Yavama, once they do Bia, they're married. So that's why we say over here, by the regular marriage, just Bia alone makes you married. If you want to make it an Asuan type of Bia, with one Bia, you can make both Erisin and Asuan. That's why we know for certain that Bia can automatically be Michael Truma. But we weren't sure about Kesef, so through the Kal V'Chomer, we said that Kesef Shloya al yidei chuppah would also be able to be suffice for the woman to eat truma. Eli Amrit, if you want to say kedushin oisa, that bia only makes kedushin, so then how did Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira say for certain that bia alone would be able to be meichel betruma? Why was he so certain that bia alone, just doing kedushin, could be meichel betruma? And Kesef, he wasn't sure. I mean, they're both just one step, and they both only accomplish Kedushin. So it must be, says the Gemara, is concluding that if a person has in mind with one bia, he can accomplish both, Erisin and Nesuin. That's what the Gemara says right now. So the Gemara says that's now proof. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak said, I will tell you, bia ashloya de chuppah. It's talking about bia without chuppah. The kesef shloya de chuppah, and kesef also without chuppah, and both will only make erisin. Oh no, bia. I'm sorry. That he meant to say that the bia that the Rabbi Yehuda ben Meseira was talking about, you actually did a chuppah, so you took two steps, and you want to say that here bia with chuppah is meichel b'truma because that's your wife. You went through chuppah, so therefore kesef alone should also be meichel b'truma. But you had a question: how could that be how could there be a kal v'choyma? Hacha by bia you're doing tarte 2 steps. That's why you're meichel b'truma. The hacha over here, chada you're doing only 1 step of kesef. So why should I say that you should be allowed to eat truma just by giving kesef alone? Kal v'choyma mi isa. There is some sort of a shmek of a kal v'choyma. V'hachi shalach lei, and this is what Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira meant to say. Uma shifcha kananis, my shifcha kananis, she'ein biyasa machilasa b'truma. Even if you do bia with a shifcha kananis, as we explained before, you're not going to be able to give her truma. You're not acquiring a shifcha kananis. A kohen that does bia with a shifcha kananis, that's not his shifcha kananis. So that shifcha kananis cannot eat truma. Afil al yedei chuppah. Even if he does a chuppah with the shifcha kananis, you can't marry a guy. But kasma, if he purchases the shivcha kananis, makilasa b'loy chuppah, he can give her to eat without chuppah. Zu, this woman should be also a regular woman, a bas Yisrael, should be also machilasa b'truma ayidei chuppah. There's a way through bia, and you follow it with a chuppah, you're able to feed her truma. Ein certainly shema kaspa machilasa b'truma b'loy chuppah. So certainly that kesef alone without chuppah would be able to feed her truma. That's what Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira said. So basically, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira said midai raisa, and in theory, an arusa with kesef, a woman who became an arusa with kesef, she's a bas Yisrael, she should be allowed to be eating the truma if she's engaged to a kohen. Avama Esa, what can I do? Amr Chachamin and Rusa Bas Yisrael has too much b'shum the ula. And Rusa Bas Yisrael cannot go into chuppah, cannot eat truma, even though she's an arusa, because until she goes into real chuppah, because of ula, as we explained before, we don't want her to feed her brothers. So Ben Bagbag, why didn't Ben Bagbag like this kal v'choyma? You're comparing the kesef of a regular isha to the kesef of a shivcha kananis. And if the kesef of shivcha kananis makes the shivcha kananis eat truma, the kesef of a bas Yisrael, even though she's only an arusha, should be able to eat truma. So the Ben Yochanan and Ben Bagman disagree because gabe shivcha kananis loy shiur bekinyona. By shivcha kananis, to buy a shivcha kananis, all you have to do is give her money. All you have to do is pay for it, and there's nothing left to do. But hacha by a bas Yisrael that is an arusa, shiur bekinyana, you left over something. There's still another step, and because there is another step, you didn't complete the process of acquiring your wife, and therefore Ben Bagbek held that one is not allowed to. A bas Yisrael who's engaged to a kohen, arusa, would not be allowed to eat truma. So again, no proof from that brisa that bia alone can accomplish both erisin and isuin. There, it could be that bia only accomplishes erisin. There, the brisa is talking about bia together with the chuppah. Ravina just again, he's just answering the brisa to explain that the brisa is not dealing with bia and chuppah. In other words, it could be that everybody holds both Ben Bagbag and Rabbi Yehuda ben Meseira both hold that erisin alone would allow to feed truma. So what was Ben Bagbag all upset? Why was Ben Bagbag all upset? What's going on over here? It had a totally different conversation. Midaraisa, everybody holds. Mifsha pshitale, everybody would agree to achla. And erisin, a girl, a bas Yisrael who's muresis, doesn't matter, it's star, kesef, bia, just erisin alone, she can eat truma. But they had a question: what is the reason the Rabbanan said an eris, a woman who's mureses, should not eat truma? And this is what Yochanan ben Bagbad sent to Rabbi Yehuda ben Meseira. Shmati alech, I heard about you. You're not concerned that maybe we'll find out that the girl, that the Arusa Bas Yisrael had a handicap, and it will turn out she was eating truma as an arusa, and let's say the husband finds that she has a certain handicap, he'll say that the whole kedushin was a big mistake, and in the meantime she ate truma. And when she was a Yisrael, she's not married to a Kohen. Turns out the kedushin was a big mistake. Why are you saying that? Shalach lei. So Yehuda ben Meseya said, "V'ati atu emikein." When it comes to marriage, we're not worried about a mum. We're not worried that it'll turn into a kedusha ties, because we'll see like this: ma shivcha kananis, just like a shivcha kananis, shem biyasa machilasa betruma, kaspa machilasa betruma, just like shivcha kananis. Kesef alone makes her eat truma. Like chayshin in the simpa, we're never worried that maybe it'll turn out you'll find a handicap with the shivcha kananis, and it turns out that the whole purchase was an error, and the shivcha kananis was eating truma. And she wasn't really belonging to the Kohen. You're not worried about that. So certainly, Zu should be also machilas b'truma. Ein adin shekaspo machilas b'truma leichas simba. Here, when she has bia and a person who actually checked her out before marriage, you do much more of an investigation. So and you right away, if they had bia. Certainly, we're not going to be choishes. Oh, the whole marriage is going to fall apart because it was kedushay toys. So she can eat truma, gesundheit. So therefore, even if you only do kesef, you could be machil betruma, and you're not going to worry about a simple, a handicap that's going to undo the whole kedushin and make it a whole big mistake. So that's what Yehuda ben Meseya said. But he said, "Avama esa, what can I do? I agree with you in theory." That and the Chachamim said, Arusa Bas Yisrael ain't chelis b'truma. I agree that Arusa Bas Yisrael does not eat truma. We go to Yud Aleph Amar Aleph, chuppah, until she goes into chuppah, mishum de'ula, because of what Ula said. That there's another reason why she doesn't eat truma. You see, they both agree that Arusa doesn't eat truma, but Yehuda ben Meseya's reason is what Ula said, that if we allow her to eat truma, she might feed her father and brothers who are Yisraelim. So Ben Bagba, why didn't Ben Bagba agree that that simpan is not a problem by a woman? He said like this: simpan is a problem, and just because it's not a problem by an eved, should not be a problem by a woman. So the Gemara says Ben Bagba simpan ba'avodim lesle. A simpan, a handicap by shivcha kananis, you're not going to have a problem with that. Why? Because if the Kohen purchased and it's the handicap is right there, everybody can see it. He purchased it anyway, the shifcha kananis with the handicap, so you can't say I didn't know about it. Let's say she has blemishes under her shirt or something like that, her blouse, and he didn't see it. Who cares if she has a cut underneath her blouse or something like that? All he's requiring her is that she should be able to be a maid. It shouldn't bother her that she has any problem. Nimsa Ganava Kavyustef, we find out that she turns out to be a kleptomaniac, right? And that he didn't know. That he should have expected that, because all avodim and shivchas are kleptomaniacs. They steal anyway. My Amrit, what are you going to think about? What else? Maybe she escaped prison and she's a fugitive. She's on the run. She's supposed to be given over to the authorities. Hanikoliously, those things are in the news, so he would have known about it. So the whole concept of simpan cannot apply by a shivcha kananis, but it could apply according to Ben Bagba to a woman. And that's why Ben Bagba's reason of why a woman, Arusa, doesn't eat truma is because, what's the reason? Because maybe the husband will find the handicap that he didn't know before, and it'll turn out the kedushin was one big mistake, and she was in the meantime eating truma, and it'll turn out that she was never engaged to a kohen because the whole kedushin fell apart. So now the Gemara just finishes off the whole conversation here. Michte, let us see. Bein labar, it doesn't matter. Rabbi Yehuda ben Meseya, Bein lamar, according to Yochanan ben Bagba, loy achla, they don't eat truma. Right, Arusa doesn't eat truma. My benayu. What's the reason? What's the difference between them? If the reason is because simpan, or the reason is because of you're going to feed the brothers and sisters, the brothers and the father that are living in the house where she is as an Arusa. So the Gemara says, there is a difference. Kibal. Let's say a man got engaged to a woman. The Kohen got engaged to a woman. He says, no matter what handicap she has, I'm still marrying her. He's hungry, he's smitten by her. So therefore, sumpin, you don't have a problem. So that type of arusa type of woman should be allowed to eat truma. But if you hold the reason, maybe she may feed her father and brother, that reason still applies. Or let's say she left the father's house. She's on the road to go to the chuppah, or she's on the road to go to her future husband's house. So at that point, she's not around family. So the family reason doesn't apply. But there is a problem of simpan. Maybe when she arrives by her future husband's house, he's going to find a handicap and undo the whole marriage. So therefore, there are certain situations where she would be allowed to eat truma according to one opinion and not according to the other opinion. And that's why there are two different reasons why a woman who's an arusa will not eat truma until she goes to chuppah. But one thing we conclude the sugya is that the Gemara did not come to a conclusive point, is that can bia accomplish both erisin and isuin? The Gemara doesn't seem to answer that. New Gemara, Bekesef. We learned in the Mishnah, Beishamei Omer B'dinar. Beishamei says is a dinner. So the question is, everywhere in the Torah, the kesef in the Torah means a pruta, a penny, a pruta. So why did Beishamei says a higher to Mekadosh Nisha is a dinner? What's the reason of Beishamei? Omer Abzera said there's an absolute reason. No woman wants to be mekadesh herself with less than a dinar. A woman has pride and dignity, and she doesn't want to be sell herself just for a pruta. So the minimum that they estimated that a typical woman is only a dinar. Now the Gemara understands that if that's the case, that every woman wants a dinar, what happens if you find one woman that cheapens herself? Would she be able to collect less than a dinar, according to the Beis Shammai? Let's say there's one woman that thinks of herself very low and she wants to accept a pruta. Would that work according to Beis Shammai? The way the Gemara understands it, it would not work. So wait a second. That the Gemara says, Abaya said, El Meyata. Let's try a bigger scenario. Going, Benase the Rabbi Yanai, the daughters of Rabbi Yanai. Rabbi Yanai, let's say, was a billionaire, and his daughters, the Kaptan and Avshayu, they were, most of their daughters announced that they're so particular. They need 3 calves of dinar zahav in order to be mekadosh themselves, and they're never agreeing to marriage unless the guy comes with so much money. Now, that's known. So hachaname, if you want to say that since that's their threshold, the pasha, if you have one of those daughters, the pashta yada v'kibla chad zuzim acha, if one of those daughters didn't want to marry rich to rich, but stuck her hand out and was makabel kedushin just from one dinner from somebody else, hachaname do have a kedushin, it would not be a kedushin. How could you give a set figure and you can't? If a woman says, I think I can do for less, and you're not going to allow that. So that's what the misunderstanding of what Rab Zera said. Amalei, so Rab Zera explained to Abaya, if a woman sticks out her hand and wants to accept less, loy kamina, I have no problem with that. Ki kamina, so even a woman, according to the Beis Shammai, that wants to accept less than a dinar, so Beis Shammai would agree, a pruta would be fine. Ki kamina, but what I was talking about, that any woman that didn't didn't stretch out her hand to accept less than a pruta, what's the general price for a woman? The kitcha belayla, let's say you mekadosh a woman at night, iname dishavi shliach, she sent a shliach and didn't say a price, then a dinner would be the mainstream price, because most women will not sell themselves for less than a dinner. So that's the understanding of Beis Shammai. So Beis Shammai is not an absolute dinner. Beis Shammai would agree that if a woman stuck her hand out and said a pruta, even Beis Shammai would agree that's mukudeshes. But most women, if they didn't say what price, you have to pay a dinner because they have a higher standard. Rav Yosef said, Tamei the Beis Shammai is much more involved. The reason of Beis Shammai that says the din is Rav Yehuda Maravasi. Rav Yehuda Maravasi called kesef ha'oma b'Torah kesef tsuri. The kesef that's written in the Torah was in the currency that was around when the Torah was written. The currency that was around when the Torah was written is called kesef tsuri, and really the bottom of the currency was called a ma'ah. Up top of that was a dinar. On top of that was a selah. Now, so really, when the Torah said kesef, it should be a ma'ah, right? But since, again, a woman wants to show some dignity, so you don't say the lowest denomination of that currency, so that's why it's a dinar. But in the time of the Torah was written, there was no such a thing of a currency that had a pruta in it. That's the point. There was no copper and pruta in their currencies because there was no currency like that. Therefore, kol kesef amatari kesef tzurei v'shel divrayim. But once the Rabbanan came around, and then the new currencies developed, then kesef Medina, then you could use the kesef of Jerusalem, which there the denominations went even much lower to a pruta. And in fact, the new currency was 1/8 of the old currency. So the point is that really Beis Shammai holds that when the Torah says kesef, really it's the lowest denomination that was in the time of the Torah, which is called a ma'ah. But by a woman, we don't want to say ma'ah, so we say dinar. But it's much more than what you think it is, much more than the normal pruta. So the Gemara challenges that. So whenever you see in the Chumash kesef, it means ma'ah, one ma'ah. Says the Gemara, uklaluhu. Is that a general rule? Another few minutes and then we'll stop. Is that we go to Amud Beis, Yud Aleph and Beis. The Gemara asks, is that a general rule? Well, Tanya, we learned in a Tana, we learned that that the concept of moida b'miktzas. If someone is demanding his money back from where he deposited the money, the guy says, "I don't," and you never gave it to me, he doesn't have to swear. But if the guy would say, "I agree to part, you're asking me for 100, and I agree that you deposited only 25," so then you swear. So that's called a moida b'miktzas. If you agree impartial, you have to swear. The pasuk says, "Ki yitin ish el re'eu kesef or keil nishmor." Kesef. Notice it says kesef. You give kesef and keil nishmor. You and the other guy agrees that you gave him something. Utnam, we learned in the Mishnah, Shvuas Adayonim, Hatana, the claim is shtei kesef, two ma'ah. V'hayda, and the what's called moida b'miktzas, shava pruta. So what the Gemara's question is, how come over here, this is just a side question, you said everywhere in the Torah is kesef tzuri, which is the lowest denomination, is one ma'ah, so why did we say by moida b'miktzas that claim has to be two ma'ah, not one ma'ah? Answers the Gemara, there's a special reason why it's two ma'ah. Hasam dumi the kalim. The Torah says kesef or kalim. Kalim is plural, two. Ma kalim shnayim, av kesef shnayim. So therefore, just like kalim is two, so therefore the claim of kesef can't be that you deposited one ma'ah, you have to deposit two ma'ah. Uma kesef davar chashiv, and just like kesef is something important, av kalim davar chashiv. So also kalim, it works the both ways. That you can't make moida b'miktzas. The guy says, I gave you 2 thumbtacks to watch, and the guy says, "Oh, you only gave me 1 thumbtack." Since it's not a davar chashiv, so therefore there's no moida b'miktzah shvua. So it has to be kalim that are something important. Now the Gemara asked another question. The pasuk says when you pay the ma'isa sheni, v'tzarta kesef yadecha. You put the kesef in your hand and you can pay the ma'isa sheni and bring it up to Yerushalayim. Utnam, so you should be able to be pay the ma'isa sheni on ma'ah, not on prutas, not on copper prutas. But we learned that if you happen to have put the ma'isa sheni on prutas, you can turn it into a selah. But you see that you could put it on prutas, on copper. But the Torah says pidyon ma'isa sheni can only go on a kesef, on a ma'ah. So how do you resolve that one? After the Gemara, kesef riba. The Torah add the word ha-kesef. It could have said kesef. And it says ha-kesef, the extra hey, says that not only a ma'ah, but you could even go to the current denominations, which have prutas, and you could actually take up ma'isa sheni and transfer it onto pennies. Prutas. Flag the Gemara, very hegdish, the ksiv and also kesef komlai. Hegdish, the Torah says that you can, if let's say someone made a certain item hegdish, you could transfer that kedusha onto money, right? You could transfer the kedusha of hegdish onto money. So if the Torah says you could transfer it onto kesef, it probably the lowest denomination you could transfer hegdish to is on a ma'ah, right? But ba'am Shmuel, Shmuel was describing a case where hegdish, that's a very expensive item, you could actually transfer the kedusha even onto a pruta, and it works. But wait a second, how does pruta fit into what the Torah says kesef? A copper denomination, the Torah says silver denomination, which was ma'al, which was kesef tsuri. And says the Gemara, Hasanami kesef yalav b'maisa. There's a shava kesef b'maisa sheni, just like my sheni prutas work. Kesef, but hegdish kesef works. Now the Gemara gets to this final question, and this will end. Vare kedusha isha, the kedusha isha, you can mekadosh a woman. The pasuk says, "Kikach ish isha bala v'gaba kikach kicham stay afrin utnan beisila oimen pruta v'shav pruta," and this Hillel is the one that holds you could mekadosh isha with a pruta. What does Beis Shammai hold? You have to use either. You should technically use a ma'a, but Beis Shammai even says more than a mar. You use a dinner, which is the next higher. So Rav Asi, who said that when the Chumash says kesef, it means the denomination was when the Torah was written, when there was no such a thing of a copper denomination. There was only silver denominations when the Torah was written. So it must be that Rav Asi holds like Beis Shammai. Just like Beis Shammai says, you can only make mekadosh isha with a dinar. So Rav Asi, who said any kesef that's written in Torah was was silver denominations. Name of Rav Asi the Amaka Beis Shammai. Rav Asi hold like Beis Shammai, and Beis Shammai in the place of Beis Hillel we ignore. So it's not that way. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav Asi kol kesef kotzev amabatar. If the Torah gives you a set price, like a fine to pay, and it tells you how much to pay, right? Kesef tsuri, then you use the kesef tsuri. But kedushin, there's no set price how much you have to give for kedushin money. So even Rav Asi would agree that a pruta is fine. Vishal devreim kesef dina. But when the Chachamim made up a price, then you don't use the Tsuri denominations. You use the Jerusalem denominations. My kamash. So the Gemara just asked, my kamash malam. What is Rav Asi coming to teach you? That when your Torah gives you a price, you use kesef Tsuri. Tanina, isn't that a Mishnah? Chamisham shaben shloishim shel eved chamisha shalosh shel mafata meir shemaytzi shemra kulam b'shekel kodesh b'moneh Tsuri. So everything that the Torah gives you a set price, you use manatsuri, and that's exactly a Mishnah. So Rav Asi is coming to teach you a Mishnah? No, the answer is V'shel Devrei and Kisah Medina Itzrachelei. Rav Asi is coming to teach you that b'drabanan, when the Rabbanan gave you a fine, they don't say use kesef tsuri. You use what at that time what the denominations was in Jerusalem. The Loitam, there's no Mishnah like that. It's only a brisa. The Tanya, we learned in a brisa, someone who blows a loud sound into somebody's ear, and the guy jumps and gets embarrassed because he was like frightened. You have to pay him a sela for the embarrassment. So don't say my sela. What is a sela? A sela in Kesef Tsuri was arba zuze, was for dinners. So that's what you should pay, which is a lot of money. Elamai sela, when the Chachamim said sela, it means palga duzuzi, 1/2, because since there are 4 dinners in a sela, when in Jerusalem, their denomination was 1/8 of the Torah's denomination. So 1/8 would be you divide the 4 into each of the 4 into half. So it'll be 1/2 a zuz, and that's what you have to pay. The sela doesn't mean the sela Tsuri, it means the sela that was in Jerusalem, sela Medina. Some people call a half a zuz a sela in the vernacular of the Rabbanan. Okay, so Be'ez Hashem, we're able to finish Daf Yud Aleph.